So you're now on Unit 2.2. We just learned what cells are. We learned that cells are an internal complex set of jobs. And inside of a cell, a whole lot is going on. But remember, a cell is also surrounded by an environment. So we're going to be looking at cell homeostasis, how the cell responds to its environment and how it regulates its conditions. Remember, cells are the basic unit of life, and so they also have to perform these life functions of Sternger. We're going to start by looking at transport. We've already talked about synthesis a little. We'll come back to synthesis. But we're going to talk more about transport. Remember, transport means to move. And cells, we already know that cells vary. We already know there are blood cells, muscle cells, nerve cells. But they also vary in what they need to bring inside and what they need to release to the outside. If a cell is bringing something in or out of the cell, it must pass through the cell membrane. And so this cell membrane right here, we want to pay really close attention to. Notice these little circles with the legs. We're going to go ahead and label those phospho, you should know, lipids. And so you can see that the phospholipids create a barrier. Here is the inside of the cell, here is the outside of the cell. So if something is going to come in, it must cross this barrier. Just by looking at this picture, without knowing anything about these words, you should be able to see that some things can pass across the cell membrane very easily. You'll notice they used a different shape, the triangle, to show that some things can pass through, but they have to pass through this certain shape. We're going to learn these are proteins. Other things can pass through, but they have to use energy. You already should know ATP means cell energy. And so we can see that there are going to be three main different types of transport. And that's what we're talking about in this unit. So first, in order to understand what can come in and go out of cells, we have to understand the cell membrane. Remember, the cell membrane is the barrier that surrounds all cells, and it's made of a bilayer of phospholipids. Please pay attention to this part. Bi means two. You see two layers. So also here on your picture, if you'll write bilayer equals 2. You have these two layers of phospholipids, but you also have what are called embedded protein channels. And so these two things we're going to label as protein channels. Before we really talk about these notes, let's think about how this makes sense. Some things can come into the cell no matter what. Other things we're controlling what can enter. Notice if it wasn't this triangle shape, it didn't get through. So this is all about regulating what can enter and exit the cell. There are some molecules that we need to come in and out of the cell regardless. And those are molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Big exclamation point there. They cross the membrane, period, always. They don't need any help. They do what we call diffusion. We're going to talk about the word diffusion a little bit more, but you might be able to tell something from the picture. Look at how there's a lot of them outside, and they're moving inside. So small molecules can cross pretty easily. Think of the cell membrane like a window screen. If I open the window, air can move in and out through the window screen really easily. But larger molecules, even like water, if it rains, some water will come through the window screen. But larger molecules, for example, like a fly, they can't get through. And so this is going to be how we regulate what can enter and exit the cell. These proteins, some of them allow for passive transport, and others require active energy. This is going to be a big part of understanding this unit, is that some things move passively, no energy, and others require energy. So at this point, you need to make sure that you understand what a cell membrane is. It's a barrier between the inside and the outside, made of phospholipids with these protein channels. Now we're moving on to talk about this passive transport. If we want things to be able to move into the cell, we don't want to have to use energy all the time. So passive transport requires no energy because molecules are spreading out from a high concentration, spreading out from high to low without any barriers. We're going to talk about two main types called diffusion and osmosis. But notice, passive means no energy. It happens all on its own, but it happens because we have a lot over here. There are no barriers, and they're allowed to spread out. You'll notice some really important words in this figure, like concentration. We're going to talk for a second. What does concentration mean? Concentration means the amount in a defined space. Now, if you've ever made Kool-Aid, right, the Kool-Aid at the beginning is really concentrated, and then you add more and more water. You concentrate the Kool-Aid in the hot water, and then you add water to dilute it. So this word concentration, notice there's a really high concentration over here, a low concentration on this side. So the molecules are moving from high to low concentration until they are, look, equal. So molecules keep moving around until they're equal. So I want to give you an example. If you've ever sprayed air freshener, right now it's really concentrated in this can. These molecules of Lysol can't go anywhere. They're trapped by the aluminum can. But if I press down on the top and I allow them to come out, you can see where they come out, but then it seems like they disappear. Well, they haven't disappeared. I just can't see them with my eyes anymore. But guess what? My nose can smell them. And as these molecules spread out, more and more people would be able to smell them. Eventually, on the other side of the room, you might be able to smell them. So we're learning about this word diffusion first, because diffusion is the spreading out of molecules from a high to a low concentration. Notice it's underlined. You need to memorize that definition. Diffusion is the spreading out of molecules from a high to low concentration. Diffusion happens every day, all day. When you spray Lysol, when someone mixes cream into the coffee, diffusion is just the spreading out of molecules from high to low concentration. It's possible because molecules are actually always moving and colliding. Even though we can't see it, molecules always have a tiny little bit of energy that makes them move. And as they spread out, no energy is required because molecules are moving with or down the concentration gradient, high concentration to low concentration. You'll notice this is underlined. You do need to know what a concentration gradient is. It's the difference between two concentrations. High concentration, low concentration, the concentration gradient. So, the concentration gradient is actually really important for your body. Your cells are using oxygen, meaning your cells have a really low level of oxygen. When you breathe oxygen in or gas in, there's a lot of oxygen in your lungs, but your blood doesn't have as much. So the oxygen will diffuse from a high concentration in the lungs to the lower concentration in your blood. But then when your blood delivers it to your cells, the blood is higher concentration of oxygen and it diffuses into your cells. It moves passively. The opposite is kind of happening with carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is made by your cells, moves from high to low into your blood, high blood into your lungs low, and then out of your body. So every breath you take is an example of diffusion. These gases are moving from high concentrations to low concentrations. Now, if they were ever equally spread out, we would call that equilibrium. Notice that word is underlined. But in your body, you're always using oxygen, always making carbon dioxide. So you're going to have diffusion of oxygen into your cells, carbon dioxide out of your cells. So we need to know this word diffusion, and that it means the spreading out of any molecule. Next, we're going to talk specifically about the spreading out of water. The diffusion of water, but notice it's not if I pour water, it's the diffusion of water across a membrane, which means it's moving in or out of a cell. And so when we look at osmosis, we can see that it's going to be passive transport. No energy is needed here, but cells must actually balance their water content. We don't want your cells to swell up and burst with water. We need to be able to balance it. So we do want to pause for a second and notice a few things. We talked about diffusion. Diffusion is the spreading out of anything. Osmosis is the spreading out or diffusion of water across a membrane from high to low. So you're going to be asked to find where is there a high concentration of water? Where is there a low concentration of water? The minute you find the high concentration, you know that water will move from high to low. It doesn't take any energy because it's passive. There are a few words here that we need to pay attention to that you might have not ever heard before. The first is pure or distilled water. It means 100% water. Versus salt water is actually going to contain solutes. A solute are molecules such as salt or sugar. So if I have 100% water and I add sugar to it, it's not 100% water anymore. When we look at this picture, you notice this word concentration. We have to understand what concentration means. And here it's saying lower concentration of solute. Well, if there's a low concentration of solute, that actually means there's a high concentration, you can abbreviate it CONC, of water. If there's less solute, there's more water. Here it says higher concentration of sugar. That means there's a low concentration of water. Well, which way will water move? It moves from high to low. That's why you see the arrow showing you that water will be moving this way. Now, this is called a U-tube. And what's interesting is that as water moves, it will actually, the pressure will defy gravity and push the water higher up over here until there's an equal concentration on both sides. So what you need to be able to do is find concentrations of solute and concentrations of water. So in order to determine how a cell will react, we have to first calculate how much solute is dissolved in the water. What is the concentration of solute? Then we find the side with the most water. Remember, if there's high solute, lots of salt or lots of sugar, that means there's less water. So here we see that cells placed in distilled water. Distilled water, we know, is 100% water. Here, cells are placed in a concentrated salt solution. That means there's less water. Once I know the way that water moves, once I know where there's the most water, I know where water will diffuse. So because they are placed in 100% water, that means there's more water outside, and water will move in. So water, we see moving inside of the cell. More water outside, water will move in. Over here, less water, water will move out. The last thing that I want to make sure that you have is some factors that affect cell transport. So you might need to pause the video here so that you can get them, and then make sure that you complete the summary box.